And we are all about the countdowns here on HQ today. March Madness is upon us. Selection Sunday is just about 4 weeks away, 27 days to be exact. And you know what that means. There is an all-new bracketology from Jerry Palm. He was a very busy guy this time of the year. And here are the teams that he thinks are the last four in and the first four out. So the last four in, he's got West Virginia, UNC, Wisconsin, and Mississippi State. The first four out, Kentucky, Texas A&M, Arizona State, and Oregon. And when it comes to the one seeds in his latest bracketology, he's got the same four. They've been pretty consistent over the last bracketology. Purdue, 23-3. They're now ranked third in the AP top 25. He still has Bama, Kansas out of the East, and Texas out of the West. And let's welcome in the man himself, Jerry Palm and Matt Norlander, to talk some college hoops, especially with just 27 days to go until Selection Sunday. So, Jerry, of course, we got to talk about Purdue. They're still a one seed despite that loss to Northwestern, 3 quad one losses now. What does that tell us about Purdue? And then on the other side of the matchup, how much better of a position does that put Northwestern, when you're making the bracketology and looking forward to the tournament?
Yeah, so for Purdue, this is not really as bad a loss as it sounds. People aren't used to hearing Northwestern's name when we talk about the NCAA tournament, but Northwestern is a middle of the bracket team right now because not only do they have this win, but they've won at Indiana, they beat Illinois. I mean, this is a team that has put together a pretty decent tournament resume. Really, the only team that's given them, some trouble is Michigan. They must not match up well with Michigan because they've beaten them twice. But, it's a pretty good team. I don't even really consider Northwestern a bubble team at the moment, although that could change at pretty much any time. So it's not that bad of a loss for Purdue, which still has 9 quadrant one wins and 8 wins over teams that are in the top half of the bracket. So, that's still a good enough resume to be number one overall over Alabama, which has the best win between those two teams, the win at Houston. But then the drop off in the quality of Alabama's wins is relatively steep compared to what Purdue has. And of course, Alabama has that loss to Oklahoma, which is not a team in the bracket. So that's why I have Purdue still ahead of Alabama for the overall number one. But Purdue had better learn to take care of the basketball or they're not going to be there for long.
Yeah, Purdue had some Northwestern credits to Northwestern. Purdue turned the ball over on like 38% of its second half possessions on Sunday. I'm not worried about Purdue big picture, by the way. I actually think it would not surprise me personally if the Boilermakers went from now until the start of the Big Ten tournament and didn't lose again. That would not surprise me. I'm not guaranteeing it, but I actually think they've got enough there. Obviously, Purdue has dropped 2 of its past 3 games overall. Northwestern's interesting. Got a little room to stretch right now in NCAA tournament projections, and it's a wonderful story. This was a great moment, pre-Super Bowl moment on Sunday for Chris Collins. Who, listen, I talked to a couple sources earlier this season, and my understanding is at the end of last season, if Northwestern was in a place financially to have moved on from Chris Collins, it probably would have done so. So he entered this season in a hot seat year, potentially needing to make the NCAA tournament to save his job. And as you just saw on the screen there, Jerry's got them sitting on the 7 line right now, and it's a really good story. Northwestern almost infamously has only made the tournament once ever. It was back in 2017 with Chris Collins. The whole history of the tournament, 1 trip. Now on the precipice of going again, and certainly got to give a shout to Boo Buie, one of the best names in the sport, one of the best players in the conference, and he has been huge for Northwestern, was big on them on Sunday, and him with Chase Audige, who's a really elite defender as well. They've got a good shot. At this point, can't believe I'm saying it, Jerry and Jacqueline, but I would be surprised. I know it's Northwestern, but I would be surprised if Northwestern did not make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, Northwestern, they're just rushing Welsh Ryan there, and rightfully so in that video. Jerry, moving along to Kentucky, you have them as one of the first 4 teams that are out. UK coming off those losses to Georgia and Arkansas. Jerry, they're just kind of a hot mess at the moment.
That might be generous. I refer to Kentucky as basically a one-hit wonder. They had that win at Tennessee, and that's great. They lost all of their other quad 1 games, plus they lost to Georgia, which is quad 2 technically, and then South Carolina, which is quad 4. I mean, this is a team that basically has had one shining moment this entire season. And that's not enough to get them in the NCAA tournament, not with the losses that they have. They haven't done enough to overcome the bad losses on their resume. And it's just, there's still time. There's still talent. It's not like Kentucky can't just turn it on, but man, that team seems to be a mess. And there's something going on that we're not seeing on the floor.
I wrote a column on Kentucky over the weekend for CBSSports.com. Talked about them on HQ. I'm going to repeat because I think this is important perspective here. Right now, Kentucky's out of the field. Kentucky doesn't make the tournament. You see the schedule here. All right, can they sweep Tennessee? That would be huge. At Mississippi State, that's a quad one game and it's no gimme. They got a real challenge awaiting them on Wednesday at Florida, home to Auburn, Vandy, at Arkansas. When I look at this schedule, and I have the amount of uncertainty that I do with Kentucky, it speaks to the relative dysfunction that this program is operating under John Calipari. So right now, they're not projected to make the tournament. If that does not happen, Kentucky will miss the NCAAs 2 times in a 3-year span. The only other time that has ever happened since 1947 was in the late 80s, early 90s, over a 3-year run when Kentucky was serving a postseason ban, a 2-year postseason ban, for breaking NCAA rules. So right now, Kentucky is on the verge, potentially, maybe, of missing the tournament 2 out of 3 years for the first time since the 40s, when the NIT was actually a bigger deal than the NCAA tournament there. But I'm going to stick with what I said recently on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. I'm still going to say they managed to get in. I'm going to say Calipari gets it done. They've got enough on the roster, and they squeeze in. It won't be pretty, but I do think we will look up on Selection Sunday, and when we're talking here on HQ, we will be talking about the Wildcats in the field. They might be the last team in the field. Maybe they can somehow turn it around and get to the 10 line, but I think they'll somehow manage to do it, even if it's a little bit bumpy.
All right, Jerry, let's talk about some other teams that might be the last ones, the last 4 in. In that column, you have UNC and Wisconsin. You got UNC coming off that win over Clemson. And then in the meantime, the Badgers blowing a 17-point lead against Nebraska. Jerry, what do you think we're going to see from these 2 teams over the next 4 weeks?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, they're hard. They're in this part of the bracket because you never know what you're going to get. But North Carolina's resume is pretty clear. They can't beat a quad one team. They're 0-8. They've only got 1 other loss, I think. So, or maybe 2. So that's a team that is just not getting it done against their better competition. Their wins over their quad 2 wins though are decent, and that's why they're in the bracket. Plus, they don't have the soul crushing losses that Kentucky has. But North Carolina is 0-8 against quad 1. No one has ever made the tournament since I started tracking in '94. Other than 0-6 Oklahoma, that's the most losses without a quad 1 win, 1998. So yeah, 0-8 would be a record, and I'm not confident that North Carolina is going to make it. Wisconsin has got one of the weirdest resumes you'll ever see. They're 80 in the net. That doesn't exclude you because the net's not that important, but they're 80 in the net because 2/3, maybe 3/4 of their games have been played within 10 points. So either way. And the net is a big margin of victory thing, a big scoring margin thing. So Wisconsin doesn't do well there, but they've got some nice wins. They've also got some sketchy losses, the Northwestern, which isn't as sketchy as it used to be. But this Nebraska game on the road where it's tough. Wisconsin just can't seem to make up its mind whether it's any good. And they've had some injury problems this year, and that has set them back. But, Wisconsin's going to have to play well down the stretch of this season if they're going to make the NCAA tournament.
I'll be quick on this. Wisconsin is a tricky one to watch because if you really look at the schedule, they've got more home than road remaining, and I think that they can make up ground there. The fact that Jerry still got him in the mix right now, just keep an eye. No one's talking about him for the most part because of that net ranking. That would be a record. I'm almost positive that would be a record in the net era in terms of getting in with the lowest. But if they get more wins, they're going to bump up. Carolina's got a tricky schedule. There's some slippery games like road at Notre Dame, road at Florida State. You got to win those. If you lose those, they're really going to just continue to lard onto a resume that, is not ultra favorable right now. I believe about 375 days ago, we were talking about the same exact thing with UNC not having a quad 1 win and a team never having gotten in. And Jerry just mentioned Oklahoma in '98. I think UNC will get there like Kentucky. I will say this. I actually have more confidence that Carolina will get there than Kentucky. I say that obviously having come off a weekend here in which Kentucky looked lethargic on the road against Georgia. Meantime, UNC, which has got a big one Monday night, let's see how it responds after taking care of business and leaving no doubt at all by waxing Clemson at home just 2 days ago.
All right, that is Matt Norlander and Jerry Palm joining us here on CBS Sports HQ as we have 27 days until Selection Sunday. You can find Jerry Palm's latest bracketology over on CBSSports.com, and you can also hear Matt on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. In the very latest episode, Matt and Gary Parrish are recapping this past weekend in college basketball. You can download and listen wherever you get your podcasts. You can also scan that QR code.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.